Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Now today, I'm going over my favorite all-time VR games by genre, but like normal, we're gonna put a little twist on this list. The term best is extremely subjective, and for some, the best games are only the ones that go all out, AAA production level, and top-notch graphics. But to others, it is just anything that offers up a great gameplay loop that they enjoy coming back to time and time again. And while as much as I enjoy a good AAA game, I am much more on the latter team these days and can basically enjoy anything regardless of the overall graphics. VR has completely flipped the script on the type of games I like, and how I'm planning to judge today's titles is based entirely on how much fun I had playing these games and my overall time spent in each title. Now, obviously, I'd love to hear down in the comments what your overall favorite VR games are, and if you think I failed to include any titles, or if there's a topic you disagree with me on. Now, there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but let's start today's video off with some casual games. My classic all-time go-to for so many years now has been Space Pirate Trainer. At this point, I've been talking about the game for like 8 years now, and that's simply because it's absolutely awesome. This is my go-to title to introduce people to VR, mainly because it fires on all cylinders. Solid graphics, a soundtrack that pumps you up, shooter mechanics that are surprisingly strategic, and it's both highly immersive and intuitive, allowing anyone to jump right in and feel comfortable after just a few moments. For the longest time, Space Pirate Trainer has been my ideal game where I just want to jump in for 15 to 20 minutes and clear my head. I've never turned on this game before and then walked away going, that wasn't that fun. And like I said in the intro, fun is the #1 criteria for how I rate these games, and in that case, Space Pirate Trainer always delivers. Now this title sort of carries over right into our next genre, which is the rhythm games. The obvious first thought goes to Beat Saber, which is definitely a game I've spent quite some time in, but overall I'd say I enjoy Pistol Whip a bit more. While at its core it's still a rhythm game, it just appeals more to me because it's a shooter, takes you on some wild journeys, and gets my heart pumping more from adrenaline rather than swinging my arms around like a crazy man. Pistol Whip not only delivers on some John Wick style action, but also throws you into other worlds like the far future and the wild west. But let's push into some action-oriented co-op games, and if you're a fan of this channel, you most likely know what titles I'm going to mention. Legendary Tales not only delivers some of the best VR physics-based combat, but it also delivers a massive open world, incredible mechanics for character and weapon crafting, some truly challenging boss fights, and the massive cherry on top, 4-player co-op. Now another game that slides right in here and is very similar to Legendary Tales is Dungeons of Eternity. This is another 4-person co-op RPG, where the focus is on leveling up and unlocking new gear, which allows you to journey to harder and harder dungeons. Now overall, this game is a little bit more straightforward than Legendary Tales, so if you're more about just jumping into the action with your buddies, this one might be more right for you, but either way, these are great options for co-op RPG fans. Now I also want to jump in some honorable mentions here, because again, I said I rank these games based on how many hours I put into them and the overall amount of fun, so in that case, both Titan Isles and After the Fall are top tier co-op games. Unfortunately, due to the slightly lacking player base, you might want to get some friends ready before jumping into these, as there's still people playing, but the servers aren't very packed. But if co-op isn't for you and you crave competition, let's get into the PvP category. Now in this case, I'm pretty sure I'm going against the norm, because my all-time favorite VR PvP shooter still remains Hyperdash. I'm an old school arena shooter fan, and this game tapped into something that I've been missing for quite some time. Now, if you're not familiar with Hyperdance, this is actually the first shooter that Triangle Factory made, prior to Forefront and Breachers. Now, the best part here, guys, if you never tried it, this game has gone free to play, so I recommend you jump in right now. And speaking of awesome VR free to play PvP, any MOBA fans out there have to check out Starvolt. This is not just your run-of-the-mill MOBA in VR, but rather a game that's done by a studio that clearly knows how to make not only a good MOBA, but also how to utilize VR mechanics. It's almost like a blend between a MOBA and a hero shooter with characters that feel oh so good in VR. There's everything from a lumbering mech that makes you walk like you're playing Gorilla Tag, all the way to hypermobile flying characters. So even if you're not a MOBA fan, I highly recommend you go check out this game. But let's change things up and move into local co-op games, starting with the classic Takeling's House Party. Here, one player jumps into VR, and everyone else can join either from their phone or with a traditional Xbox controller. Now, everyone outside of VR will become these little creatures known as Takelings. Now, you'll either be working together or against one another in a series of 5 different minigames. Meanwhile, the VR player will be human-sized and generally trying to murder all the takelings. It's an absolutely hilarious experience, but unfortunately it's only on PCVR and pretty much abandoned. So if you're limited to the MetaQuest and want a similar experience, I would recommend you check out Akron Attack of the Squirrels. The major difference here is the VR player is a tree and everyone else takes on the role of a squirrel. Now, generally after you introduce people to these starter games, they're curious to see just how good the graphics can get in VR, and that's when you obviously throw them into Half-Life Alyx. This 6-year-old title is still amazingly the benchmark for VR. Not only is it still stunningly gorgeous, but it's pretty much one of the very limited number of AAA style VR games out there. Across the board, it is top notch. Fantastic action, storytelling, graphics, physics, you name it. It was honestly almost too good and has set unrealistic standards for all other VR games. But even at non-AAA budgets and on mobile hardware, some developers have managed to pull off graphics that are very comparable. The first obvious example is the sci-fi story-driven shooter Hubris. Here you crash land on a stunningly beautiful alien world, and while attempting to locate a government agent, you'll slowly unravel a massive conspiracy. Now, while this might not deliver the same level of polish as Half-Life Alyx, it is still an excellent experience that I highly recommend. Now, we're going to keep the graphics cranked to the max, but we're going to move into some puzzle titles, starting with Red Matter 2. Now, as previously stated, this game is just gorgeous. I'm not sure what Deal with the Devil or Black Magic vertical robot used, but even on a mobile chipset, this game looks stunning. It's also not lacking in the story or puzzle department, making this easily one of the best VR games out there. And the same goes for the recently released Ghost Town. Even playing this on a Quest 3, every once in a while I just had to stop and admire the world around me. At times, the background felt almost photorealistic, and this comes through so much more when you're playing a title in VR. Now, while we're still on the topic of best looking VR graphics, you could pretty much name the vast majority of PlayStation VR 2 titles. Everything Resident Evil can easily be included, starting from the Resident Evil 4 remake all the way to Resident Evil Village. Additionally, titles like Horizon Call of the Mountain, No Man's Sky, Hitman World of Assassination, and Gran Turismo 7 are all stunning titles. Now, if you would have told me a few years ago that some of my favorite VR games were platformers, I wouldn't have believed you, but that's changed because VR has dropped 2 games that have absolutely blown me away. The first is Moss, which is broken up into Book 1 and Book 2. Here you get to take on the role of Quill, the world's most adorable mouse. That's right, Minnie, Mickey, and whoever else is out there, eat your heart out. Quill is way cuter than you. She's also a badass who knows how to fight back, and even speaks to you in sign language. Now, when I say I fell in love with this game, I am not joking. Everything from the graphics, combat, storytelling, and puzzles are all top notch. You also end up feeling like you made a lifelong buddy by the time you complete this game. The attention to detail here is just unmatched, and the only other platformer that comes anywhere close to it is Astrobot Rescue Mission. Now, unfortunately, Astro is limited to the original PlayStation VR, but it's still one of the best all-time VR games out there, especially if you are a platforming fan. It feels similar to a top-notch Super Mario game, but the developers truly know how to utilize VR. Scale becomes so much more significant in a virtual world, and they use that and many other aspects to make this game feel fantastic. Now, it's an absolute sin to the VR community that this is still only on PlayStation VR 1, and that the latest Astrobot never made its way into VR. But speaking of VR mechanics, there are certain titles that only work in a virtual world and are capable of delivering both top-notch action and the best sandbox experience. The first option is obviously Blade and Sorcery. This physics-based RPG-inspired fighting game delivers some of VR's best combat. Sure, there's a little bit of jank, and the Quest version doesn't run fantastic, but this was the type of game I used to dream of as a little kid playing Dungeons & Dragons. I couldn't wait to the day that I could actually embody that character and go around beating people up. Now, this title was refined across years of early access, and there's also a massive amount of user-generated mod content out there. This is a staple VR title that at least everyone should give a try. Now, if you want to trade in the fantasy setting for a bit more sci-fi, we also have Boneworks and Bone Lab. This is another physics-based title that focuses on the sandbox experience, except now you're in a more modern simulation-style world, and you have plenty of ranged weapons at your disposal. Bone Lab also likes to do a lot of crazy different things, allowing you to change size, manipulate physics, and they even create a whole bunch of different content like extreme parkour, driving a go-kart, and a Matrix-style shooter. While I'm personally not a huge fan of sandbox-style games, there's nothing quite like these titles, and they should be on everyone's VR wishlist. But the one major aspect that these games are lacking is a robust AAA-style campaign. Now, we've already mentioned games like Half-Life Alyx for PCVR, but we also need to give a major nod to Lone Echo 1 and 2. this is just another one of those games that fires on all cylinders. Amazing graphics, an incredible story, moments that stay with you long after you've completed the game, and just top-notch quality that you don't get anywhere else. Now, it's really hard to reproduce that same level of graphics on the Meta Quest, but we do have some near AAA games, including Batman Arkham Shadow and Resident Evil 4. Now, Batman Arkham Shadow is not just a great Batman VR game, but it's also just a great game in the entire Arkham series. That's right, this game takes place in the same series of absolutely fantastic flat screen titles that you may already know and love. It is easily just as good as any one of those games in the series, and they've done an absolutely amazing job transferring the mechanics into VR. Ever wanted to don the cape and feel like the Dark Knight himself? This is the closest you will ever get without potentially being arrested for assault. Now, just a quick reminder that AAA refers to overall budget, and the term is not a recognition of quality. Historically, anything AAA is 50 million or above, and there are very few VR titles in this category, and there are very few games that were built from the ground up for VR with a AAA budget. It's most likely limited to Batman Arkham Shadow, Asgard's Wrath 2, Half-Life Alyx, and maybe a few other titles come close to that number. Now, this is generally when you guys say, hey, what about the Resident Evil titles or No Man's Sky? But none of those games were made exclusively for VR, so I won't include them in this category. But if you're already a fan of VR, you're most likely familiar with all of the titles I've mentioned so far, so let's get into my personal hidden gems. First up is the story-driven Half-Life shooter Vertigo 2. The game's clearly inspired by the classic Half-Life series, but it goes completely off the rails in a very quirky direction. It's a lot less grounded, and I love describing it as Half-Life meets Rick and Morty. But what puts it on my hidden gem list is the insane attention to detail. You never really know what to expect from this game, and it feels like every moment has been handcrafted for optimal entertainment. I exclaimed holy crap at the over-the-top action, chuckled at the game's more humorous moments, and I was absolutely blown away when I saw my Steam PFP image inside the game. Now, I know an aspect like that is trivial, but it just shows the level of detail that this game has throughout. So if you're looking for a solid single-player shooter, I highly recommend this game. And another Mateo-approved hidden gem is Underdogs. This is a roguelike physics-based fighting game set in a dystopian futuristic world where people battle it out in underground fighting arenas using guerrilla-style mechs. Overall, this game has everything you're looking for in a solid roguelike, including risk versus reward mechanics, tons of different weapons and power-ups, excellent combat, and a little cherry on top is the fact that it's dripping with style. But if you want another fantastic roguelike recommendation where you don't need to be as active and can sit back and chill out, well then the no-brainer option is Ghost Signal, a Solaris game. Here you take control of a small spaceship that, after receiving a mysterious signal, gets trapped in a time loop. From there, you'll be interacting with alien creatures, unlocking tons of unique abilities, and of course having some awesome space battles with some surprisingly strategic combat. Now, the first day I got this game, I completely drained my Quest, my extra Kiwi battery, and then I ran over and plugged in my headset so I could get a little bit more time. It's that freaking addictive, and I love the fact that I have a VR game that I could chill out and sit on the couch while playing. But on the exact opposite spectrum of that, we have the VR workout games. Previously, my favorite title was Supernatural because it offered up the most content, number of exercise routines, licensed music, and best graphics. Unfortunately though, it looks like those days are over because Meta has shut down the studio. So my new go-to alternative is FitXR, which basically offers up all the same stuff. Now you get a free week pass to FitXR if you want to test it out, but after that, it will require a subscription. So if that right there is a no-go for you, your best option will be Les Mills Body Combat. Now it might be a little less gamey and lower in graphical quality, but I find Body Combat to deliver one of the best VR workout experiences. Now, since we're speaking of things that VR does well, we absolutely have to go through the sim genre. Even though I'm not at all a sim fan, I will say that these titles are absolutely fantastic. First up is the racing game Gran Turismo 7. When it comes to playing video games, racing titles are at the absolute bottom of my list, but I still found myself completely addicted to this title. There's nothing like having your very own series of racing cars and tracks that you could access from your house anytime you want. If you're already a racing fan, this game is an easy 10 out of 10, and you could spend hundreds of hours in it. But if you'd rather take to the skies, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is absolutely stunning. It's like the designers meticulously recreated the entire Earth and gave you a whole bunch of 100% realistic airplanes to fly around in. Now, you will need a pretty high-end PC to really enjoy this, and it's the type of game that you can't really just jump right into. It's much more of an investment. But if you do enjoy flight sims, there's honestly nothing better. But if you find yourself bored, need a little bit more action, or just something that's a bit more arcadey, I highly recommend VTOL. This game straddles that perfect line between sim and arcade flight game. You can't just jump into the cockpit and immediately expect to take off with no issue, but you'll most likely be up and flying in about 15 to 20 minutes. You also get to play with a series of military-style jets and weapons, and engage in everything from simple transport missions to straight-up aerial dogfights. Now, coming full circle in this genre, we are going full arcade mode with Star Wars Squadrons. Now, there's nothing real about getting in something like a TIE fighter or X-Wing and then shooting some lasers at your enemy. It is, however, a real recreation of the most epic Star Wars battles. The graphics are fantastic, there's a 10+ hour story-driven campaign, and you can load up some custom missions if you just want to jump in for some action. The multiplayer is unfortunately dead at this point, but if you have any interest in this game, just wait for a Steam sale. It usually goes down to around $5. Now, the most obvious VR genre that I haven't touched on yet is the shooter. There are a ton of different shooters out here, and I usually fire through them as fast as possible because they're made like clones of what you find in the flat screen world. I've already mentioned some great single player ones like Vertigo 2 and Half-Life Alyx, but another standout series is Arizona Sunshine. The original zombie shooter still remains as one of the best VR games, especially because they completely remade it last year. So if you want a story-driven zombie shooter that doesn't take itself too seriously, definitely check out both Arizona Sunshine 1 and 2, and a nice little cherry on top is the fact that you could play through this in 2-player co-op. Now, if you want a story-driven single-player zombie shooter that does take itself seriously, we have The Living Remain. Now, it might feel like your typical cliche zombie horror movie story. The world's gone to crap, zombies are everywhere, you don't know who to trust, and every day is a battle for supplies until something goes wrong and you eventually die. Somehow though, against all odds, you're still chugging along, shooting your way through hordes of zombies, solving some minor puzzles, and hopefully making it to the game's climactic ending. But my personal horror-themed single-player shooter is Metro Awakening. It's got these awesome underground environments, super creepy enemies, a bizarre WTF storyline, and even a nice amount of stealth. Now, I can't say just how it compares to the original flat-screen Metro titles because I never played them, but I thoroughly enjoyed every second of this game. But right now is a great time to slide into the horror games, and some titles I already mentioned like The Living Remain and the Resident Evil series are obviously some top-notch games for this category, but if we're looking for games that lean directly into horror, the obvious first choice is Madison VR, which is your classic puzzle exploration jump scare title. Now, I actually live streamed this game for you guys so you could laugh at me peeing my pants, but the joke is on you guys because I would have never made it through this game without having the chat by my side. I do want to drop a new title in here though, as I thoroughly enjoyed playing through Dead Meridian. Now, the game released a few weeks ago, and I will admit it can use some performance patches, but overall I truly enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to their Left 4 Dead style multiplayer mode. Now, I've added some new genres to today's video because there's some banger titles that I always forget to mention. First up, we have the melee fighting games, and we have to give a ton of credit to Dragon Fist VR Kung Fu. Not only did they give us a Mortal Kombat-like experience in VR, but it's also packed with features, including online physics-based PvP, which is one of the hardest things to nail. So from a mechanical standpoint, this game feels absolutely incredible, and it also includes everything from a spectator camera to full body tracking and haptic vest support. Now, there's plenty of other VR arena style fighting games that I really enjoyed, such as Swordsman VR, but I have to say Dragon Fist is in a league of its own. Now, we also have my other completely forgotten genre, the stealth games, and for me here, the clear winner is Thief VR. Now, in my 44 years of life, I've never been a big fan of stealth games, but for some reason, the Flat Thief game sucked me in, and I actually enjoyed the series even more when it eventually made its way to VR with the recently released Legacy of Shadow. Now, another stealth game that I completely played through and thoroughly enjoyed was Assassin's Creed Nexus. It just wasn't an all-time standout for me personally. Everything from the graphics, performance, and storytelling all seemed inconsistent, leading to a game that was good rather than great. And last up in today's video, we have the sports genre. Now, I will say there's not many sports games in VR that keep bringing me back, but there is an undeniable mainstream appeal for walkabout mini golf, and I completely understand why. It's fun, casual, the physics are amazing, there's tons of people in the community, and they're all awesome, and you never know what the developers are going to give you next because they've been pumping out so much content for this game. So even if you're like me me and not a big fan of mini golf, you'll still most likely enjoy this game, and the same goes for 11 Table Tennis. This is a studio that once again nailed the physics, and this title feels insanely true to life. Now just don't make the same mistake that my kid did and lean on the table, because you're gonna fall flat on your face. And last up, I just need to mention board games. If you love a multitude of different board games, then you'll probably want to check out All on Board, but for me personally, the dungeon crawler experience of Demeo and the new D&D updated version of that game called Battlemarked are my two favorite VR tabletop games. Demeo is an extremely challenging co-op dungeon crawler that for years was being called Dungeons & Dragons in VR, so Resolution Games went with that angle and gave us Battlemarked, which is an officially licensed D&D/Demeo game. This adds the overall storyline and RPG components that were missing from Demeo, and it also does a great job of scratching the D&D itch. And that right there was basically my all-time list of favorite games. They might not have the best graphics or be AAA quality, but I've dumped an insane amount of hours into these games and absolutely love it. Now, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you think I missed some great games, let me know what they are down in the comments. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing.